Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Welcome to Season 7 of the Bonsai Zone. Here I am starting Season 7 of the Bonsai Zone, and it's been a really fantastic 6 years. I've really enjoyed making the videos and responding to all your comments, and it's created a really nice community of people watching the Bonsai Zone. In September 2019, I received my Google Silver Play button. I'll show you that now. The Google Silver Play button is an award you get from YouTube for reaching 100,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel. So here's mine. I'll give you a view of it. You get a letter from Susan. I won't even try and pronounce her last name. The CEO of YouTube. Just saying that you've done something that very few YouTube creators accomplish by getting 100,000 subscribers. So that's really nice to get that. And underneath that, you get the actual play button award. Here's mine. Presented to Nigel Saunders, the Bonsai Zone, for passing 100,000 subscribers. And I'll open it up. And there it is. So thanks everyone. This is a really nice award. I can hang it on my wall, and I'll always remember my first 6 years of YouTube. Maybe once I get the other half of the roof fixed, I can hang the award maybe back here on the wall or something, and kind of have it on display as a sign of thank you for everyone who's watched my channel. It seems like every winter here in the Bonsai Zone, I tackle some project that kind of takes me 3 or 4 weeks in the winter. Kind of helps winter go by quite quickly. Last year it was the Martian bonsai soil. I made Martian soil, a Martian simulant soil, and I grew an aloe vera plant in the Martian soil, and it's still doing well today. This year I'm going to be making a Shohin display, but not your traditional Japanese Shohin display, and I'll explain why. One of the things I like about bonsai is that a bonsai can be any size. Some of these smallest trees can look like a giant tree in nature, just as much as a larger bonsai can look like the same giant tree. So size doesn't really matter in bonsai. It's all in the details of the tree and how, skillful you are at recreating a large tree. I've had this book, Chinese Bonsai, The Art of Penjing, for a long time now. And there's always been one picture in the book that's always inspired me, and that's that picture here. I've showed it before on the channel. It's a picture of a bonsai bench. It's a staggered bench, and it has all the bonsai trees on the shelves. And I've always thought that would look fantastic in a bonsai show, to have a miniature replica of this bench with all your smaller Shohin-sized trees on the benches, to kind of look like a scale miniature version of someone's bonsai bench. So this year I'm going to take this picture and try and make it a reality. In this picture, there's not only a large variety of plants and styles, but there's also a large variety of pots, pot shapes, pot colors, everything. So I'm going to be 3D printing all these pots, making miniature versions of full-size bonsai pots, and then growing a lot of tiny trees in them and displaying them on sort of a model or a miniature bench. I've seen a lot of Shohin displays at bonsai shows. They usually have like a wooden, very fragile looking wooden shelf unit that maybe has various multi-levels and then a tree on top. And the trees are arranged, the highest tree is usually an alpine tree, which kind of evokes the image of it growing on top of a mountain. And as you go down the display, you get to the lowland trees at the bottom. And I've never really liked these displays, and I'll tell you the reasons. My first reason is lighting. When I see them at shows, that top tree on the top gets all the light, and then the ones underneath the shelves, they're shaded out by the shelf above it. So as you go down the mountain, the trees seem to get darker and darker towards the bottom. They don't have the natural light of the room shining on them. Unless they have like special lights shining in from the front, you just can't see the trees well enough. All that detail gets lost. especially in photographs. And so I've never liked them for that reason. And another thing is that I don't like something over top of a tree. I like it to be out in the open. To me, it's like almost having a tree in a cage or something. I think in nature, you know, every tree is open to the sky on top. And when you see a tree with a shelf above it, it looks constricting and confining, and it just bothers me. And maybe it's just me, but I don't like that type of display. Another thing I don't like about that display is usually the display stands are very thin. They're very well made, but over time they tend to warp because it's very thin wood, and unless you store them in under ideal conditions and you know, have them stored so they don't warp at all. I see too many at shows that are showing signs of age. Either the wood on it is becoming distressed looking, or the shelves are bending in under the weight of the tree, and this just spoils the display for me. That's one of my pet peeves, is I don't like a stand to be bent. It looks like the tree's too heavy for the stand, and it's bent or warped, and it really bothers me. I know the people displaying the trees are using the best display stands they can get, and not everyone can store a stand perfectly and afford a beautiful stand. So some people make the best with what they have, and you know, I appreciate it. It's just at a top level show. I'm talking like national shows or regional shows. I see a lot of display stands that just aren't 100%, and it sort of bothers me a bit. And it's the fault of the design. These very lightweight stands, there's just no way over 20, 30 years they can stand up. It's just the design. And so I don't like them for that reason. Another thing I don't like about the traditional Shohin displays is quite often the tree that's on top of the display, you can't really see it. It's usually above eye level, so you can't see the surface of the pot sometimes. You kind of stand on your tiptoes to try and see it. I can move my camera up and get a view of it, but I don't think it's the best method. You've got all these variable heights for display. Your lowest trees, you're looking kind of down at the pots. The ones in the middle might be at the perfect eye level to look in at the tree. And the one up higher, definitely, they're way too high. You can't see them. And so that's another thing I don't like about that type of display. Another thing I don't really like about them, quite often the displays can look crowded. And I've seen some that are spaced beautifully. The tree fits the negative space it's in perfectly, but I see a lot that it doesn't. The trees are too close together. It starts to look too crowded in the display. And it looks like my plant room here with all my trees crowded in one spot, and I hate that. When I take a tree to a show, quite often it's the first time you've seen the trees with all this space around them, and you can kind of walk around the tree and see it properly. And most of the time your trees are sitting tightly packed on benches, and so when I get to a show, it's refreshing to be able to walk around the trees and see them, you know, from all different angles. And these Shohin displays, they're kind of packed in, and they're designed to look at from the front only. You don't kind of walk around and look at a 3/4 view of the Shohin display because you get the bars of the shelving in the way. And so it's a very limited view you get of these Shohin trees in this type of display, and they can look very crowded, and I don't like that. It just doesn't give the trees the freedom I think they need at a show. I'm really harping on the negatives of these Japanese type displays, but so I'll continue. Another thing in these displays is that I often hear that Shohin trees, because A larger tree, you can get more branches and more leaves and a more complex structure. And the smaller you go, it's more symbolic. You know, one leaf can represent the foliage on an entire branch. And the trees can become very simplified. And people, I always read that, well, to overcome the simplicity of the tree, you need a fancy pot or a colored pot, a brightly colored pot, and it brings the viewer in and makes it interesting. And it doesn't work for me. I hate that. I hate when the pot is competing with the tree. I would rather the pot be so muted that I'm focused on the tree rather than the other way around, where the pot is so bright and colorful and has markings on it where I'm drawn to the pot first and the tree is secondary. I think Shohin, the trees are just as important as any larger tree, and I think they deserve to be treated in the same display format as a large tree, where you have a beautiful pot underneath it that complements the tree. So when you look at it, you see one thing, one work of art, not the pot and the tree as two different works of art competing for attention. It should be unified, and I think this is how it should be with Shohin too. I don't agree with the brightly colored pots and the weird and fantastic shapes they seem to put the trees in. My last comment or opinion about Shohin trees is the way the trees are planted in the pots. Very often there's a small pot and the big mound of soil almost equal to the pot sometimes, and then the tree comes out of that mound of soil. It's usually like a ball of moss, and you see very little of the surface root structure in the Shohin bonsai. To me, when you have too much of a bulge of soil or moss on top of the pot, it looks like the tree needs repotting, that the pot's too small and you've allowed the roots to grow up into that soil that's above the pot. And I don't like that. I like the soil to be either level with the lip of the pot or just slightly raised as it kind of follows the taper of the roots up the trunk. So kind of like you would see in nature, a tree as it grows in a flat field, it kind of builds up a buttressing at the roots, and the soil seems to build up around it also. So kind of a very shallow shape that follows the roots up to the trunk. And that's what I want to see in a Shohin tree. And I very rarely see a good root structure on a Shohin tree. And I think that's because many of the Shohin trees on display are just air layers off of a mature bonsai. So, you know, rather than maybe cutting a branch off on a larger tree, it's air layered and then planted as a Shohin. So it has a very weak root structure. The pot may be filled with roots, but it doesn't have thick surface roots that are old and ramified. It has a very young root structure, enough to support the tree, but just not a root structure you'd put on display. And I think a good Shohin tree should have everything. It should have the root structure, the flared trunk, the mature bark, and a beautiful branch structure. And very often I don't see that in Shohin trees. I see no root structure, just a trunk with very little flare at the base where it comes into the soil. So a trunk coming out of the soil, and then this beautiful branch structure on top. So it's missing two things. It's missing those nice surface roots on display, and it's missing that flare at the base of the trunk. And those are very important to me. It shows maturity and stability in the tree. And I very rarely see that in Shohin bonsai. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on Shohin bonsai traditional displays. And so as you can see, I'm not a real fan of that style of displaying trees. So I'm going to try this 3-tiered shelf style. It may still look crowded. I may have not solved all the things I don't like about displaying Shohin. I'm hoping this miniature version of this bench will draw your eye in, and you'll explore the bench just like you would if you saw this giant display of bonsai at someone's place. So that's what I'm trying to recreate, is a a miniature world where you look around the benches and see what's on the bench and see what trees you like and which ones you maybe don't like. I'm looking at the picture now of the benches here, and they're built up of bricks stacked, just loosely stacked to make the 3 tiers. And then the top either looks like cement slabs or they could be stone slabs. And this one definitely appears to be a stone slab. It's not an even thickness. It has a lot of irregularities along the bottom. It's possible the cement chipped or something, but it looks like a stone slab to me. And I think they all are actually stone slabs. There's some variation in this one. So it's hard to tell. But so I'm thinking I will probably 3D print my bricks, making my tiered shelves. And then for the actual shelves, I'll either use wood, maybe some wooden slats going across, or I could 3D print, these stone slabs here, or I could make them out of stone themselves. I could find, thin stone and try and shape rectangular bench tops out of them. Or, wood. I could use plastic and paint it. There's a lot of possibilities. I think to create the miniature, it'd be nice to use as much natural material as I can. Even the bricks on the bottom here would look nice in a real clay, but I think I'll have to 3D print those. It would be hard to find, bricks that would stand up to the weather. I want to keep this display outside at all times, so it'll get this natural algae forming on it. I don't want this to be a delicate model or anything. I want it to be able to withstand all the elements so it stays outside, all year round, or in the plant room here in the winter. So it'll be a very durable type display. Here's an example of the type of trees and forest that I'll be putting on these new benches, these miniature benches. This is my pink pixie bougainvillea forest that I created 2 years ago. They were a bunch of cuttings that I rooted, and I planted them and arranged them in this 3D printed bonsai pot. So this is an example of the type of trees I'll be adding to my bonsai display shelves for my Shohin or micro bonsai. This video will be part 1 of creating these miniature bonsai benches. I'll be working on the benches and working on trees and pots to put on the benches. So I'll be doing a lot of 3D printing to create little miniature pots, and I'll be planting cuttings and trying to get my little miniature collection growing. It's time now for today's update, and today's update will be the orchard truck. This is my 1972 Ford F250 crew cab truck that I'm fixing up, and I'll be using in the orchard this summer, hauling ladders and soil and wood chips and gravel. I'll be putting it to good work. I'm out here at All Equip in St. Mary's, Ontario, Canada, for the first truck update of 2020. So let's go inside and see how it's coming along. Here we are in the shop. Here's the fender being repaired. So there's a new section of metal that's being grafted onto the old fender. It's welded up and just being ground down. So that should look really good. That's the front fender. Over here, the cab is here, standing on end. Kind of looks quite unusual. So there's the underneath of the cab. Looks good and oily. You can see all the holes in the floor. These are the cab mounts up top here, here, and here. So they're quite rusty, so they'll grind the old ones off, and there's new pieces to go on there. The rails underneath the cab look pretty good. Maybe a little... No, they look pretty good. They're quite good, and the doors are good. Yeah, so there's the cab. I don't think I'll ever see it standing on end like that again. It's kind of an unusual sight. The bed and the hood are still over here. Not much done to them yet. The frame of the truck is out in the blast shed, so we'll head out there now and have a look at it. I'm heading out to the blast shed now. This company normally refurbishes tractor trailers, both the trailer and the tractor part. They do fleet restoration services and that. So they're used to working on the big stuff. And when it gets a little slow over Christmas, they tackle these small jobs like my truck. So it's really nice of them to fit me in. Oh, and here's my truck. Oh, it doesn't even look like a truck anymore. This is one big building. So here it is. So after they media blast it, you can see the engine is all taped off. And after it's media blasted, they have to paint it right away. Otherwise you get more surface rust. So they're just waiting for a good time to fit it into the schedule for painting. So there's the frame. Let's have a look at it. It looks good and heavy duty. There's plates. If you look at the side of the frame, right here, there's plates that are welded to the side of the frame. And I think that's either to do with the crew cab to make the frame really strong because of the extra length of it. Or it could be that they had a fifth wheel on this truck, which it did have, and it may just be to reinforce it for that, extra service it did with the fifth wheel. So there's the frame. It's looking really, really different, I guess is the word, without anything on it. There's the exhaust system just hanging off the back here. That'll have to be fixed up. The back of the exhaust looks really good. It's just, I don't know, maybe the connection came loose or something. Yeah. There's the transmission. It's quite a small transmission, actually. I'm surprised. The exhaust system. I was debating on whether to get headers on this thing, but I don't know. I don't really want to stray too far from stock on it. There's not many examples of these trucks around that are kind of bone stock, if there is such a thing as bone stock. But so I may just leave it the way it is. The only thing with the headers is it gives you a little more horsepower, but a little better fuel economy too, if you drive it at a decent speed. So there it is. Truck's all wrapped up, ready to get media blasted and painted. That'll be an exciting step forward. I'm just checking it all over here. It's a good way to look at all the bits. Things like engine mounts and all the suspension parts. You could really go to town on this truck if you wanted, replacing all the bushings and in the springs and suspension. Yeah, there's no end to the money you could spend on a truck if you had all that money and wanted to do it. But it does look in really good shape. There's a differential back there. A few cables, probably going to the handbrake, I think, or the foot brake. Amazing. Just amazing. So you can see these are the cab mounts here. They're like a rubber donut. And those will all be replaced. We've got polyurethane bushings to replace that. I don't know what was up here. Something. Yeah, it'll be nice to get all this painted up. There's the old shocks down there, or dampers. They're quite small. Springs. Yeah, they'll all benefit from a coat of paint. Yeah, so that's the machine. So that's the first update for 2020 on the truck. Making progress. I'm heading to the library now, and I'll pick up a 3D printed pot and I'll show you what it looks like. Here's a holographic image of the bonsai pot rendered in 3D. This is the latest 3D pot I've designed. It's hot off the 3D printer from our local library. It comes in two pieces, the top and the bottom with the feet, and I'll have to glue them together using a crazy glue. So it turned out quite nice. This is the first pot I printed using ColorFab's brown filament, and it looks really nice as is. You could paint it with a primer to fill all the lines created from the 3D printer, you know, building up the layers. Or you could just plant it as is using the plastic. Either way, it looks quite good. I'm posting all my new pot designs on Thingiverse, so I'll leave the link to the model of this pot, which is free to download. I'll leave the link in the description below, so each time I design a pot, I'll show it in a video, and then you can download the pot and print it out. So yeah, that'll be a new thing. This pot I'll use on my shelves. I'll print a scaled down version of it, so probably, you know, maybe a quarter this size, maybe even less, who knows. Yeah, so once you have the pot designed, you can scale it to any size you want. If you have a big 3D printer, you could print it twice this size, or you could, you know, print it down as small as you want. So it's kind of nice being able to scale the pot and also design the exact pot you want. So this is a fairly simple looking pot. It's very plain. Doesn't take away from the tree when you plant a tree in it. It just should frame it nicely. Part 1 of this series, creating a miniature Shohin display. It's been a lot of talking and not much work, but stay tuned for part 2 coming up. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me today in the Bonsai Zone.